Dis donc, la petite sœur. C'est rigolo.
I remember when Andia was holding Paris. She was such a little girl then. Now she's big. Who's this?
Abba.
No, who are you?
Abba.
Agua, he's saying water because he's wet. Who are you? Who's this?
Mama.
Who's this?
Aziz.
Paris. Who's that? Hello. Hello.
Tu parles bien, ma chérie. Comment tu... Oh, oui.
No, now that's worse. Hella pale, super white. Look at how it looked. I wanted to talk about our experiences growing up as third culture kids. So obviously our mom is from one place, our dad is from another place, and we were born and raised in a different place.
I mean, firstly, I think it's interesting feeling like you're not from one place. And I think it's a feeling that we're very familiar with and that maybe not a lot of people are, where you don't feel like you have strong cultural identity linked back to just one country. And it was also an interesting experience coming to university and then realizing like, even if I'm Spanish, even if I'm French, even if I'm American, I'm actually none of these things. Because then you have people who really are 100% Spanish, born, raised, parents are there, they live there, that's their base. And I felt like I could relate to them on a certain level, but I didn't feel as Spanish as they were.
No va a ver Nuria hasta el momento cuando entre en la iglesia.
Tengo que entrar con el ramo.
Exactamente. Ahí. Así. Así.
Vale, Sergio,
yo me retiro.
me toca.
Adiós, que me retiro ya.
Uy, tío.
¿Habéis visto qué guapa está Nuria?
But I don't feel American. I've never lived there. And obviously, I feel like I am American, maybe more socially or because of certain characteristics. But at the same time, I can't relate to somebody who grew up there. And it's the same thing with France. You know, when I'm in a group of French people, I still feel like I'm a little bit left out. And so oftentimes when people are just asking you the question, where are you from? It's a bit difficult to answer because I don't feel like I'm 100% from one place. And I feel sometimes a little bit excluded when I meet somebody who is from that place.
Especially here in Spain, when people ask me where I'm from, I'm like, I'm half French, half American, and I'm never from the place. Say in the United States, they ask me where you're from, French, Spanish, and in France, I was Spanish American. You know, I was never really from the place, even though I did hold a passport or had some family that was somehow related to that nationality. I kind of feel Spanish, but at the same time, I know through family I am, but I don't hold a passport. So there's always that discussion you get with a friend, like, you're not really Spanish, you know, you don't really have a passport, you can't vote. But you're like, yeah, I've been living here my whole life.
Okay, year 2, group 5, ready to start, Bruno.
So it's all these little things that you kind of integrated into your life while you were growing up somewhere. But a little issue of, you know, am I really Spanish, or...
I got to hold on my lads. Jamais les oreilles, comme tu m'as dit. Today was my birthday. I celebrated it. No. After my birthday.
I remember like family, friends, or like other people categorizing us as like, oh, she's more American, she's more French, and like he's more Spanish. And I just wonder like where people got those ideas from, or like the need for like labels and like to categorize us. And I feel like for me, there definitely have been times in my life where like I felt a stronger need to have a label or like to be from a specific place. I think mostly in like the teenage you know, like high school years where like the only thing you want is like to fit in and like to be relatable, and that time where like you don't want to really be different to anybody else.
I was really comfortable always speaking Spanish. So between football teams, you know, rugby teams, all these sport, I was speaking way more Spanish on a daily basis than let's say you or Alexa. I kind of felt a little bit more comfortable when I was younger speaking Spanish than, for example, let's say French.
Also, like from what Paris is saying, it just shows the link between like cultural identity and language, that like you felt more Spanish because you felt like you could speak better Spanish.
Il est où le tracteur vert?
Tracteur vert?
Ouais, avec des grandes roues. Avec les roues, quelle couleur elles sont les roues?
Jaune.
Oui, c'est bien. Tracteur vert avec des roues jaunes. Et ça, qu'est-ce que c'est ça?
Moissonneuse.
Une moissonneuse batteuse. C'est très dur à dire. Ah, c'est vrai. C'est très difficile.
I feel like sometimes if I'm struggling with my language, and obviously I feel like I'm fluent in all three languages, but at the same time there are certain times where I feel like I can speak one better than another, is that you'll feel less like French if I feel like I'm struggling with my French or that I'm struggling with my Spanish. And then
The way that we were raised is that one parent spoke one language, the other parent spoke another language, and then we spoke another language in our environment. So I think we could like compartmentalize.
Run over there so I can see the Eiffel Tower with you.
Like they're like, it's so cool you guys have spoken 3 languages since you were young, whatnot. And I was like, okay, there's the perks, but there's also its negatives, you know. There's the fact that I feel like, me personally at least, I wasn't able to perfect any of the 3 languages. So of course, you know, I may be stronger in one language in one thing, I may be stronger in terms of like business in Spanish, but there's always that feeling that you said, Alexa, where, you know, when you don't speak a language like French or Spanish, but then you surround yourself by a Spanish or French group, and you want to try and speak the language, but you feel and you know and you hear that you make mistakes. There's always that like, oh damn, you know, I'm not really from here, and it's not really my first language. There's always that little feeling of exclusion that you get, especially when you're trying to think of a word in one language and you don't get it, and you're like, shit, I know it in the other one.
Lily was a bit smaller when we got
I know, she was exactly.
Pero qué mayor estáis, chicos. Pero qué mayor estás, Alexa. Qué mayor, qué grande.
¿Te gusta?
Mucho. Me encanta cuando me lo trajeron. Me encanta.
And so when people ask me where I live, I say Portugal because that's where I live. You know, I can say England, but at the same time they're like, yeah, but where's your house? Like, where do you live? And then they can ask me, like when we were talking about politics, like, oh, you know, what do you think of the elections that were happening in Portugal? And I'm like, I don't know anything that's happening in Portugal.
You know, I live in the UK, and I just remember when Brexit was happening. I was towards the end of my first year of university, and I just felt so helpless. I was like, I can't decide something that essentially is going to affect me. When the big presidential elections come up in the US, I get to cast my ballot, but I'm not really going to feel necessarily the repercussions of the result because I've never lived there and I don't live there right now. We have this power in places that doesn't affect us, and then we don't have the power in the places we need it.
Et comment on fait? Tu prends ça.
T'appuies, tu fais froid.
Et tu fais flap, pas par terre, hein? Allez, 1, 2, 3. Hop là. Attention. Allez, la poêle. La poêle. Oui. Et tu mets un petit peu d'huile.
You know, we struggle with our cultural identity and we struggle answering the question, where are you from? I think I have felt quite jealous of people sometimes where it's like, you can just go home. And I feel like sometimes I don't feel like I can just go home because we don't really have one specific home anymore.
Where is home for us? You know, like what is our base? What is our rock? Like we can't really say. It's more like once we're all together. I feel it can be anywhere. As long as it's us together, then we're gonna be like, okay, that's our base. But it's no specific location itself.
Sal, pimienta. ¿Esto qué quiere decir?
Loro.
Ham.
Oh, Lord.
Come on, Alexa. No. No, no, no.
Alexa, ZA is a word. ZA.